purple suit that Joe Murphy made us wear. It's not an homage to Galway, because we trounced them in 1919 and we won't mention 1998. Ever again. But what? There's Galway. Always one. There's always one. And of course, the real great thing about it is we have a decade of commemorations committee. I'm sure people know about it. We got involved last year with Prosperous, with an amazing success story with the 1798 reenactment. But I mean, with the commemorations on the national level, I mean, you hear guys going on about it and you wonder how relevant it is. When you break it down to the local level and you find out, like the posters tell you in the hallway, about the local connections, the stories that we all build our communities on. That's what makes it important. And 1919, we've been waiting for this for a long time. Since 2015, when we rolled out the strategy for the county, we were talking about the 1919 All-Ireland. Sadly, Kildare didn't win that many of them, only 4. And this was the second one. But I mean, it's hugely important because it can make such an impact on children. And what we're always trying to do is trying to impress upon the children that they have an important history and a heritage. And this is why we travel around to schools all the time. This is James Durney. My name is Mario Corrigan. We both work in the Kildare Library Service. And part of what we do is go into schools and go and talk to groups and whatever. And then you meet people like Darren and Joe and Brian and a few others that kind of take you off on little journeys and take up your whole weekends and get you to do things, strange things. And it's brilliant. It's absolutely amazing. We had a great night last year in here with 1798, and it was the first time I went into a school with Darren Brereton in Prosperous on the Friday of the festival. And nobody here will see that. You know, we go in and there's all these primary kids and we told them about 1798, told them when they see a red coat, go boo, which they did proudly all day Sunday. It was great. But Darren sang the song, The Battle of Prosperous, and it was the first time I'd heard it. And you could see from the kids, it wasn't a sound. They just sat through and they listened to the story of 1798 through the lyrics of the song. And Darren had reimagined the music because there had been no music for it. And we got the flag done. There had been a flag mentioned or written about it, but nobody had seen the flag in 200 years. So that's a way of bringing history alive. And from that little night, which we have replayed in a different way tonight, from the night in the drama hall last year, Darren performed the Shan Van Vogt, and out of that came a little album of 3 songs, which was an amazing achievement for Decade of Commemorations and for Prosperous Heritage Festival. Out of that is coming an album of Kildare songs, which we hope that the Federation, which is a county-wide group of history groups, will release, if it all goes to plan, in October of this year. So all those little steps, all the effort that is put into a festival in Prosperous last year, and the fruit that comes from that is something to be proud of. So any time that the lads or the ladies from Prosperous will call us, we will gladly come along and do our thing. James actually put my name up there today, and he put it in front as well, which makes me feel great. I'm not doing anything, really, you know, so if you have any really easy questions at the end, I'll have a go at them. If you have difficult ones, James is there, you know, and he can be embarrassed, there's no problem about it. He wouldn't wear the purple, so that's my job, you know. He's the lilies, but of course you couldn't have 2 teams in white, so, and Cara's natural colours, obviously, it's perfect, you know. There's a tribute to Kildare v Galway 100 years ago. It's been reenacted on Sunday. If anybody doesn't know, there is a reenactment, or there's a tournament tomorrow morning for underage in Carrigia FC, and that's at 12 o'clock. So come along, support them. And that's the Larry Stanley tournament, which is really apt. And again, that's a great way of getting them to understand that 100 years ago Kildare won in All-Ireland, and that's been commemorated with the teams, the legends versus the heroes, on Sunday at 2 p.m. And following that, there's a melee. That's all I'm saying. Thankfully, we won that one as well. Okay? That's all I'm saying on that. But come along. festivals and all the hard work during the year don't work unless people actually show up. So tell everybody, get out there and enjoy it. You've got one of the greatest historians of the period in County Kildare, the guy who's written the books on World War I in County Kildare, the Civil War, the War of Independence, and a political history of County Kildare from 1913 right up to the millennium, here to entertain you. So I'll disappear. I have to click that top little thing there to make a little movie play. So I'm not running away from you. I just don't want you to be too long without something happening. Bear with us, and ladies and gentlemen, James Durney and the War of Independence in County Kildare.
Thank you, Mario, for that introduction. The reason I began to write was about maybe 20 years ago, when I was looking to find out about stuff about Kildare. What happened in County Kildare in the First World War, what happened in County Kildare in the War of Independence, or what happened in County Kildare in the Civil War, and I could find nothing written. A paragraph in Michael Hopkinson's book, The War of Independence in the Midlands, was all Kildare merited. So I decided then that I would make, I think it's a mission in life now, is to chronicle whatever happened in County Kildare in that period, and also, what's more important, the people that were involved in it. And a lot of times people would say to me, oh, you're a military historian and that, and I say, no, I'm not. I'm a social historian who actually writes about people in military times or in military terms or anything like that. So what happened is then I end up writing about the people and trying to chronicle what the small person done. We all know about Michael Collins, we all know about Padraig Pearse and James Connolly, but what did Michael McCormack do? What did Tom McCormack do? What did Tom Harris? And all those small people are the ones that I'm interested in, making sure that they're not forgotten in history, or the guys that went off to the Western Front and were killed in their hundreds, in their thousands, making sure that they're remembered. Those that sacrificed through the War of Independence, the Easter Rising and the Civil War, not only their lives, they don't have to die to be remembered, but I mean, a lot of these people spent long terms in jail and imprisonment through the War of Independence, through 1916, through 1923, 24 even, on hunger strike, and how that took a toll on their lives. You know, a lot of them died young then as well. One of McCormack's dies in 1941 from the effects of a hunger strike, or from the effects of imprisonment and that. So that's what I was trying to do, was just to make sure that everybody in County Kildare, no matter how small or how big a part it played, would get a mention in the history books. And I end up writing on the one road a political history of Kildare in 1913 to 1994. And I remember Liam Kenny, a good friend of mine, wrote the foreword to it. And he says, Jim, he says, if you're going to write a book about Kildare in that period, he says, it's going to be fairly small. You know, he says, it'll only be a couple of pages. I can't imagine it making a book out of it. And when I began looking at it, I was thinking the same thing. Yes, I was able to write a book on Kildare in 1916, followed up with a book on Kildare in the War of Independence and Kildare in the Civil War. This next month I'll be releasing a book on internment in County Kildare, about the Curragh internment camps in 1921, with a list of everybody that was interned in the Curragh, 1,500 names and addresses of people from all over the country who were interned in the Curragh. And I'll probably follow that up then with one about Tintown and the internment camps in the Civil War. So there's a huge amount of information. There's a huge amount of knowledge, and it's people like Joe Murphy and Michael McCormack who come to me with this bit of information, and Liam and the Breardons and all those, to tell me the stories of their people and what they were doing. And this is what I do, this is what I put in the books, make sure that they all get a mention in that. And that's what I'll be doing, is till the end of this decade of commemorations, and probably beyond into that, and work on something else of that. But it's all, mostly my stuff is Kildare based, and that's really what I'm doing, is trying to make sure that everybody, big or small, gets a mention in history. So, without further ado, Mario will start a little film there, just to give you a flavour of the War of Independence. The Irish War of Independence, or the Anglo-Irish War, was a guerrilla war from 1919 to 1921 between the Irish Republican Army, then known as the IRA, and British forces, the British Army, along with the Royal Irish Constabulary, and its paramilitary forces, the Auxiliaries, the Black and Tans, and the Ulster Special Constabulary. Irish Republicans saw the War of Independence as a continuation of the Republic declared in Easter week in 1916. Kildare too sought to maintain the traditions. Many had fought with the Irish Volunteers, the Irish Citizen Army and Cumann na mBan, while others served with the British Army. 15 volunteers walked from Maynooth to Dublin, including Donal O'Buchala and Tom Harris from Prosperous, Tom Byrne and Patrick Colgan. Although the Easter Rising was crushed, the British response led to greater popular support for Irish independence. A general election was held in Ireland in December 1918, 1 month after the Great War had ended. Sinn Féin won a landslide victory. 2 candidates were returned for County Kildare. Kildare South's newly elected TD, Arthur Connor, was imprisoned in Dartmoor Jail, while Donal O'Buchala, TD for North Kildare, took a seat as the inaugural Dáil went into session. Dáil Éireann met for the first time on the 21st of January 1919 in the Mansion House, Dublin, as an independent Irish Parliament. On the same day, members of the Irish Volunteers ambushed Royal Irish Constabulary officers who were escorting a consignment of jelly night at Solahead in County Tipperary. 2 RIC men, both Irishmen, were killed and their weapons and explosives seized. It is often seen as the first engagement of the Irish War of Independence. The IRA ambushed RIC and British Army patrols, attacking their barracks and forcing isolated barracks to be abandoned. The conflict also involved civil disobedience, notably the refusal of Irish railway men to transport British forces or military supplies. On the 20th of August, members of Dáil Éireann and the Irish Volunteers swore an oath to the Irish Republic. The Volunteers officially became known as the Irish Republican Army. Dáil Éireann, Sinn Féin, the IRA, the Gaelic League and Cumann na mBan were declared illegal by the British authorities. Michael Collins' squad targeted members of G Division, the police intelligence section in Dublin. Collins was helped by a policeman from Rathangan, Eamon Bry. On the 7th of September, the first British soldier killed in action since the 1916 Rising was fatally wounded in Fermoy, County Cork. British troops ran amok in the town, smashing shop windows and looting. This reprisal set a pattern that would continue for the next 2 years. Cumann na mBan was an auxiliary organisation attached to the Irish Volunteers. They were involved in first aid and delivering messages for the volunteers, but as the conflict escalated, some began to use weapons. For much of 1919, our IRA activity involved capturing weaponry and freeing Republican prisoners, while the Dáil set about building a state. The arrival of the Black and Tans and auxiliaries in the spring and summer of 1920 escalated the conflict. These men were veterans of the Great War and hardened by combat. They were very brutal towards the civilian population and often murdered people at will, including prisoners. The new British recruits to the RIC were called the Black and Tans because when they came to Ireland there was a shortage of police uniforms and they wore a mixture of army uniforms and police uniforms. The Uxies were recruited in Britain from among ex-officers who had served in World War I. Some were from Ireland, many had been highly decorated in the war. The auxiliaries in companies of about 100, heavily armed and highly mobile, operated more or less independently in Dublin City and in the south and west, where IRA activity was greatest. They wore either RIC uniforms or their old army uniforms with appropriate police badges along with a distinctive tam o'shanter caps. British reprisals for IRA attacks were harsh and inflicted untold hardship on the civilian population. This is the sack of Balbriggan when 3 people were killed and a main street burned. And here we see the burning of Cork city centre. The cost of the night's devastation amounted to 3 million, in today's money almost 143 million pounds. Not to mention the estimated 2,000 people thrown out of work or rendered homeless. There were several ambushes in County Kildare in which 3 RIC men and 2 IRA men were killed. After a successful ambush against an RIC patrol near Greenhills Kill on the 21st of August 1920, in which 2 RIC men were killed, Black and Tans burned down a bootmaker's shop in Naas and ransacked Brockle's public house in Kill. The IRA formed active service units or flying columns made up of men who were often on the run, who could not stay at home due to fear of arrest. They were highly mobile and well armed and were quite successful against the Crown forces. They lived off the land and were supplied with food and shelter by local people. Much of the fighting took place in Munster, particularly County Cork, Dublin and Belfast, accounting for over 75% of the conflict deaths. In Dublin City, the IRA were particularly active in armed attacks on street patrols and the assassination of individuals working for the Crown. On the 21st of November 1920, Bloody Sunday, 14 British intelligence operatives were assassinated in the morning by members of Michael Collins' squad. In the afternoon, the RIC opened fire on a crowd at a Gaelic football match, killing 14 civilians and wounding 65. The referee was Mick Salmon from Main and Plain, while Frank Burke from Carbery was marking Tipperary player Michael Hogan when Hogan was mortally wounded. That night, 3 Republican prisoners were tortured and killed by the auxiliaries in Dublin Castle. The Rat camp on the Curragh was opened in March 1921 as a direct consequence of Bloody Sunday. Prisoners from this area in turn were Michael Fitzgerald from Allen Cross, Kilmeague, Richard Harris from Prosperous, Frank Herbert from Kilmeague, and James Logan from the Hill of Allen, Kilmeague. Tom Harris was interned in Ballykinder camp in County Down. These are volunteers from North Kildare 2nd Battalion in the Rat internment camp, and the North Kildare Battalion was originally formed in Prosperous in 1917. By the time of the truce in July 1921, 4,500 Republicans were interned throughout Ireland. Over 1,300 were held in the Rat camp on the Curragh Plains, including over 100 from County Kildare. A tunnel escape by over 50 prisoners took place in September 1921. The Allen ambush, March 1921, and we will hear from a volunteer what exactly happened in Allen in March 1921. Could we have a volunteer? You must be captured by the Black and Tans.
I'm going free.
Here he comes. Here he is, sir.
An account of an attack on the Black and Tans lorry at Hill of Allen, 1921. In March 1921, it came to the notice of the company, the Prosperous Company, that on almost every Sunday a contingent of Black and Tans and RIC would travel by tender from Kildare to licensed premises in the Robertstown district in order to enforce the Sunday Closing Act. It was decided to attack this lorry on the Hill of Allen on its journey back to Kildare. The Battalion Council approved the plan made for the attack, and Richard Harris, at that time Battalion Vice Commandant, was put in charge, with Edward Tracy, Captain of the Prosperous Company, and Michael Fitzgerald, Captain of the Allen Company, second in command. The men of the Prosperous Company moved their arms, which consisted of 7 Lee Enfield rifles, 12 bombs, and about 12 shotguns, to a house on the roadside near where the ambush was to take place. On Sunday morning, March the 13th, 1921, the men of the Prosperous Company met at Newtown Dunor at about 11:30 and walked 4 miles over the bog to Allen, where they met the men of the Allen Company. According to plan, a farmyard and a farmhouse was taken over The men with the shotguns were put in place, and 2 men with grenade experience were placed beside a wall, beside which it was proposed to halt the lorry by pushing 2 farm carts out onto the road suddenly. There was a steep slope from the yard of the farmhouse down onto the road, and the carts could be pushed by 2 men, and the carts would roll out onto the road on their own momentum. The 7 riflemen were put in position on the roadside under the hill about 100 yards back from where the lorry was to be halted. They could, from this position, enfilade the road and prevent the enemy from taking cover. A man was placed high up on the hill to signal the approach of the enemy. The men were in position at about 12:30. The enemy usually appeared between about 1:30 and 3 in the afternoon. And as our positions were unconcealed from civilian passers-by, everyone who passed was put under guard and held at the back of the farmyard. We had to take this precaution in order to prevent news from reaching Kildare town and the Curragh camp, which were only 4 miles away. The men stayed in position until about 6 o'clock. At that time, about a dozen civilians had been held, and as the residents of Kilmead village, about a mile distant, knew of what was happening, we decided to abandon our positions. The Allen Company were dismissed first, and the men of the Prosperous Company began moving off, and when they had proceeded through several fields, someone heard the noise of motors. The order was given to double back, and when they had got 1 field distant of the road, about 500 yards, the lorry appeared. The order was given to shoot, and the lorry came under a heavy fire. The Tans jumped from the lorry as the driver tried to get it around the tree that was thrown out onto the road. They kept answering our fire until the lorry was on the straight road to Kildare. They then raced for the lorry under cover of the roadside bank. They jumped in and they got away. Our rifles fired about 100 rounds. The men with the shotguns fired a volley, but at that range the shotguns were useless. It will be seen that a matter of about 20 minutes saved the Black and Tans from destruction. Nobody can be blamed for the failure of a well-planned ambush within sight of the Curragh camp. And we feel that the following men, Michael McCormack, James Heffernan, Peter Kane, Joseph O'Neill, James Coffey, Michael Fields, and Lawrence Condren, whose claims for pensions were turned down and who took action in the attack, should have their claims reconsidered. Signed, Edward Tracy, Officer in Command, 4th Battalion, 7th Brigade.
Tom Harris was born at Cloncurry, Kilcock in 1885 and went to live with his aunt Elizabeth Turney in Prosperous after the death of his parents in 1902. He joined the Irish Republican Brotherhood and the Irish Volunteers in 1915. Tom was a founder and officer commandant of Prosperous Company. He mobilised at Bodenstown in Easter Monday with Captain Tom Byrne and Lieutenant Ted O'Kelly. After failing to blow up the railway bridge at Sallins, the three went on to Maynooth. On Easter Monday evening, he left Maynooth with the local volunteers and fought in the GPO and 2 other locations during Easter week. Accidentally wounded in the foot, he was detained in the hospital in Dublin Castle for 3 months. Interned in Brixton Prison and Frongoch Camp, he was released on the 3rd of August 1916. He was appointed Commandant 2nd Kildare Battalion in mid-1920 and was elected to Naas Rural District Council and to Kildare County Council that same year. He orchestrated and took part in the Green Hills ambush when 2 RIC men were killed in 1921. Arrested by the military in Naas on the 22nd of November 1920, he was taken to Keene Barracks, Curragh Camp, and charged with being an officer in the IRA. He was interned in the Rath Camp to Curragh and later transferred to Ballykinler Camp, County Down, and was released in December 1921 in the General Amnesty. Tom Murphy was born in 1898 at Killybegs, Prosperous, and lived at Landonstown, Salins. He joined the Republican movement in Dublin while serving his apprenticeship to the pawnbroking business. On his return to Landonstown, he joined Prosperous Company Irish Volunteers and later became staff officer with 4th Kildare Battalion. He was arrested after the Easter Rising. His release date is not established. Thomas Murphy took part in many engagements, including the ambushes at the Hill of Allen and Stacumney near Selbridge. He was arrested and interned in the Rat Camp de Curra in 1921. His brother Bill was also active. Tom, Michael and Paddy McCormick of Kildare, Robertstown were members of Prosperous Company pre-truce. Michael took part in the Allen ambush with 11 other members of Prosperous Company. Tom and Paddy were founding members of Robertstown GFC in 1919. Along with another brother, James, they joined the National Army in 1922. Michael was anti-treaty and was interned in Dundalk Barracks but escaped. Michael was recaptured and subsequently went on hunger strike for 22 days in 1923. The truce was declared between the IRA and Crown forces on the 11th of July 1921. Negotiations began between the two sides to reach a political situation. On the 11th of July 1921, 2nd Battalion, 7th Kildare Brigade, 1st Eastern Division stood at a strength of 453 all ranks. G Company Prosperous had 48 members. Among them was Joseph Condren above and his brothers Lar and Patrick, who were all members of Prosperous Company, IRA. The Anglo-Irish Treaty was signed on the 6th of December 1921. This ended British rule in most of Ireland, and after a 10-month transition period overseen by a provisional government, the Irish Free State was created as a self-governing dominion on the 6th of December 1922. Northern Ireland remained within the United Kingdom. Sadly, within months, brother fought brother as the country was plunged into civil war.
I think we'll show that in a little bit of time. So, if we want to take up some of the house slides for a second, if anybody has any questions, or even just some stories people want to actually share, some information, that'd be great. As I say, all difficult questions to James. Yes.
Yeah, Mario, one. With regard to the Allen ambush, you mentioned that there were 7 Lee Enfield rifles and some shotguns. What kind of hardware did the other side have?
The other side would have been well armed. They would have had Lee Enfields, probably pistols, and again grenades. Some of them would have small carbines, possibly even a Lewis gun. I mean, these were a paramilitary force, but they were as well armed as a British Army patrols would be. But battle hardened. These guys would be, these would be tough guys. These would be hard men to fight and to take on. I mean, the auxiliaries even, they run amok until November 1920 when Tom Barry famously ambushes them and kills 18 of them. But up until that, they were a thorn in the side of the IRA. The IRA were basically under pressure until they eventually overcame the auxiliaries and that, and seeing that these guys, which they would be nowadays would be known as special forces, could be defeated.
And just to spread it out nationally, and I leave it at that, did they have difficulty in sourcing weapons?
Very difficult. Now, when you hear 7 Lee Enfields, that's really good.
Right.
I mean, because most companies, and especially in County Kildare, would be very underarmed. Shotguns were the norm, and shotguns, as you know yourself, are useless in an ambush situation.
These were essentially farmers' shotguns.
Farmers' shotguns, single and double barrel shotguns. In the ambush at Barra House, just on the Kildare-Laois border in 1921, a group of volunteers ambushed an RIC patrol. 2 of them were actually killed. 2 of the attacking party, which is unusual, were killed. The shotguns they had, the ammunition, the cartridges were damp and didn't fire. And some of them did fire at the RIC, but the RIC were armed with Lee Enfields and carbines and ended up actually winning the engagement. And one of the young volunteers was found shot dead with a shotgun in his hand, and it hadn't even fired because the ammunition was damp. So they had all these things against them. Even County Kildare, it's hard to plan an ambush or even engage in ambush in Kildare because the countryside is so flat. It's not like if you go to West Cork or Kerry, it's ideal country, or even Armagh, Bandit country. It's ideal areas for ambushes. Kildare doesn't have that. Plus the fact that they have the most heavily garrisoned county in the country with the Curragh Camp and an infantry barracks in Naas and an artillery barracks in Kildare. The chances of getting the better of these guys was very slim.
The other thing to follow on to that is that they could be resupplied. I mean, if the volunteers use up all their ammunition, or they've got a big problem. Whereas you've got the other guys go back to barracks and they get re-kitted out. You know.
If you use up your ammunition, you've none left. I mean, you can't go and buy it or anything like that. That was a big problem with the IRA. And towards the truce, they are under pressure weapons-wise. You know, and it's one of the reasons why they do agree to a truce, so they could recruit and get more arms into the country.
When you think about the Black and Tans, I mean, they really become the most hated people since Cromwell. The legacy from that time. We interviewed a lady, she would have been in her 90s, it's a good 10 years ago now, and she remembered growing up in Ballymore Eustace, and they would actually pin a list of names to the door. And if they raided the house and everybody on that list wasn't in the house, you were going to be either tossed into prison or they could even burn you out. And she was terrified of it. And this was like 80 odd years later or something like that. And we even still see it in all the movies and everything. They are the real villains, but they were hateful and the terror. Yet we looked at a documentary, the Pate news clips, they're all free. The movie you saw at the start, and you can download those, you can look at them online. And there are interviews with people like Tom Barry, Dan Breen, brilliant things online that you can look at. These key guys that were involved, but they also had interviews. We were looking at Black and Tans, explaining. One guy said he was going to join the French Foreign Legion, but they weren't going to pay him enough. There was pittance, and they saw posters for there was this job in Ireland. It paid really, really well, and they were at their wits' end. They didn't want to sign up for the dole basically and sign up in the queues, and they didn't see a problem with it. Go over and sort out the Irish for a time. Another strange thing that we came across, a guy came down from Dublin last year to deliver a lecture on a book he'd written about Churchill had actually brought Black and Tans from Ireland to Palestine to resolve some of the issues that they were dealing with over in Palestine, which is again shows you what James said when he used the word special forces. They had skills, not skills that we would hold or in any way endeared, but they had a set of skills that were useful for the job that they were brought in to do.
And just what they say here in the book, the auxiliaries, who were even actually worse than the Black and Tans, they were all ex-officers who had served overseas and were paid £1 a day plus cost of living expenses for their service in Ireland. These guys were practically mercenaries. £1 a day, that's £7 a week in 1920-21, which was huge money. Black and Tans were recruited from ordinary soldiers, just from NCOs downwards, the private soldiers. And again, their money, if I can find it here as well, they were well paid. And they came over because they were out of work, and they were, we hear that they were the dregs of the English jails and that. Not really. They were just guys that were out of work, hardened to tough conditions on the Western Front and that, and were over here for the excitement and just to get paid and do what they want basically. And many of them would have suffered post-traumatic stress too as well. But they were tough. They were the toughest guys, as we were saying, special forces types. Now the lads that would have joined the Foreign Legion and that, and they come over here and they're allowed to do what they like and get away with it for a length of time. And really, what happens when the truce comes is that the British government are very embarrassed by the antics of the Black and Tans and the auxiliaries, which burning down the city centre of Cork and all that. And they used to go around with lumps of cork hanging out of their hats, just as a trophy to show that they had burnt Cork to the ground. These were the type of guys who were dealing with.
There's a newspaper report commenting on a group of auxiliaries, and they were supplemented by Black and Tans a bit later in Trim, and the same group had operated in the kind of Robertstown area. And the guys in Trim said that basically all hell had broken loose when these particular unit had arrived, And they were the guys that were operating within this area. So, if you were caught with a weapon, or if you were caught in an attack, these men like at Allen, I mean, it looks on one level that nothing really happened. They fired a few shots, Black and Hands got in the truck and they went off. But if they were caught, they were most likely weren't going to make it out alive. So they were literally putting their lives on the line. Anybody else? Sorry.
I seem to remember hearing rumours of Miss Barron that at least some of the Black and Tans were civilian prisoners that were released to come over here.
This is probably Sinn Féin propaganda in that a lot of them were the dregs of English jails and all that. Most of them would have been, some of them were petty criminals and that, but that would have got into trouble in that. But they weren't released specifically just to join the Royal Irish Constabulary. They didn't need to. They had plenty of willing recruits because there was huge unemployment in Britain. When the First World War was over, they were supposed to come home to a land fit for heroes, but they came home to Britain that was crippled by unemployment and financially broke after the First World War. So there was no jobs. They had strikes then by miners and all that. So there was no work. So they went anywhere for work, whether it was to Ireland, and as soon as they were finished in Ireland, they went on to Palestine then to join the police in Palestine, and did the same thing in Palestine as they were doing in Ireland. But it's really kind of just propaganda to say that they were the dregs of English jails and that. But they were, some of them were very fond of a drink and all that. I mean, as you see in after the ambush in Naas, they come in and they burn Bushel's boot shop, which is beside the Leinster Leader offices at that time, and then they go out to Brockle's pub in Kill. They go into the pub, beat up a few of the locals, and loot the whole bar, and shoot up the area and take all the drink. And they were the type of lads that would go into the local pub and get around the drinks but not pay for it, and I don't think the barman was going to argue with them. So they were fond of a drink and fond of beating people up and that, and generally thugs in uniform.
And of course, the opposite, the way to deal with that is that viciousness breeds viciousness, and this is what you have with the squad, which is basically going in and they assassinate guys. There's again an interview with one of the guys, I don't know whether it's Billy Byrne or something from Dublin, and he basically, when they went into the house, the landlady tried to stop them going in on bloody Sunday morning into her house, and they persuaded her when she saw the group of them and she knew what was coming. She told them that, well, one of them's in a room down the hall and one's in there. And they went down, got one of the officers from the room down the hall, brought him back into the room where the other guy was, lined the two of them up against the wall and said something like, God have mercy on your souls. And he said, I plugged both of them. His words, I plugged both of them. And Dan Breen, there's a clip of Dan Breen, and he's like, I'd say 50 years after the election, he said, I'll do it again. He said, if any man comes into my home, into my country, and he said, I have no problem with it, none whatsoever. I don't feel any kind of remorse, nothing. And when you lose someone close to you, when you're in that situation, it very quickly kind of can spiral out of control. And that's what you see with Bloody Sunday, with the retaliation on both sides, I suppose, but certainly from the auxiliaries and Black and Tans, they were well capable. Anyone else?
But quick question. The RIC were basically your standing police force in Ireland at the moment.
Yeah.
What was the opinion of the superintendent of the RIC at the time, to Black and Tans and people who was coming in to supplement their force and the carry-ons? Did they have any
A lot of them
dissension on their...
A lot of them didn't want the Black and Tans, didn't want these new recruits. And a lot of them, you see a lot of the RIC resigning rather than serve with them in that. And most of the guys that can get out, the likes of Inspector Supple there in Naas, he bails out. His house is shot at in Naas in the beginning of 1919. And then I think a year or so later he retires in that as soon as he can get out with his pension and that. A lot of the other guys, the basic RIC fella, the decent ordinary policeman that was probably in Robertstown Station or something like that, a lot of them resign rather than serve with them. And there's a famous case, I think, in is it Tipperary or Cork, where I think is it Jeremiah May refuses to serve with these new recruits, and the British officer says something like that. That's my countrymen you're talking about, because your man says shoot on sight. He says if you see someone coming towards you with their hands in their pockets, don't ask them to stop. He says shoot on sight, and just shoot them. No, this is what he was telling him. It doesn't matter if you're right or wrong. He says we'll back you up. So Jeremiah May steps forward and he says, that's my countrymen you're talking about. And he says, I'm totally against that. He says, we're totally against that as ordinary policemen. And your man Smith, actually, it's Inspector Smith, says, well, if you're not prepared to carry out these orders, we have no time for you. And he says, well, right, I'll resign. And he resigns there, and about 5 or 6 RIC men with him resign en masse. On that day, refusing to serve with the Black and Tans. Now, incidentally, a couple of weeks later, Inspector Shoot on Sight Smith, they start to call him then. He happens to be in Cork in a pub or a restaurant with another fella, actually an RIC man from Naas, and a couple of Cork volunteers come in, and one of them says, your orders were to shoot on sight. He says, now you're in sight, and he shot him. Killed him there and then. So, and he shot the other lad, the Naas lad ran and got him in the leg before he got out the door, but it was mainly Smith they were after. So it's not really that they're going out shooting every RIC man they can find, because they know that some of them are not part and parcel of what's happening. So that's why you don't see too many attacks on later on Irish policemen. Most of them are those that are loyal to the Crown. Most of the kind of decent RIC men resign if they can.
And there are wonderful stories. There's a sergeant in Naas who was gave the secret
Jeremiah May, he gives the information to Michael Collins. He has this secret cipher key and all the information. This is where Kildare excels as true intelligence, with the likes of Eamon Bry from Rantangan, who was working for the DMP in Dublin, and then he's working for Michael Collins. And you have Jeremiah May in Naas as well, gives over the secret code to Michael Collins as well. You have another guy in Newbridge Barracks as well. So all around Kildare, they're working in mostly intelligence, and this is where County Kildare excels throughout the War of Independence, rather than in guerrilla actions, which they're not going to win anyway. So
I think there's a story in Kildare. There was a very famous volunteer called Michael Smith. He's the commander of that caravan company. He kind of tried to turn out in 1916. He stood to arms, but it just didn't. But he turns out in the War of Independence, and he's captured and he's about to be executed. But the order had to be sanctioned by the local RIC sergeant, who refused to do it. And for years later, the sergeant ran a public house in Kildare town, O'Leary's, and Smith would come in and he'd have his glass in the corner, and they kind of shared this bond. But he'd saved his life, So it's only when you get into the story that it's very difficult to say it with that. It's very, it's black and white. There are lovely stories where RIC men were loyal, proved very loyal and sympathetic to the Irish cause. Anyone else? Okay, bear with me. We're going to just show you again a very short clip. We don't have the 1919 All-Ireland, sadly, but there is a clip online of the 1927 All-Ireland, which Kildare did win. There's a clip, I think, of the Leinster final. We won the All-Ireland in 28 as well. Sadly, you see Kerry beating us in 26 All-Ireland final. But in 1921, it's the earliest clip, I think, of Kildare playing, and you see them on Croke Park playing against Dublin, who were victorious on that day in the Leinster final. There are 5 bands preceding, and I think we get to see all 5 bands. So bear with me. In one clip, it's not this one, you actually see a Kildare player coming out of, there's no dressing room, they literally walk through the crowd onto the field, and he's smoking a fag. And he throws the fag away, and then he goes off and he plays in the All-Ireland. I don't think you get away with that these days. But you see all the bands and of course the spectacle. This is the Joneses' role of Bloody Sunday. You know, that's what to remember it as well. And one of the interviews when they talked, one of the guys who was actually on the field that day when the firing started, he said that the auxiliaries and the Black and Tans are actually climbing up onto the walls and firing in. It doesn't happen like the movie. They don't drive the armoured car onto the field, but they're firing into the crowd, which of course is devastating, and this is why there's such a huge loss of life and a huge number of injuries. And here we have, look at the anti-cap, big caps, but these are the Kildare man now, in white of course. And the others are in the darker colour, you won't mention. Look at this, look at the price. I think they'll go across the other side.
And the boots, you see, no modern boots here now, they look really hard to run in as well. And of course the big leather ball.
So you want to see this kind of class of football Sunday to the end.
Welly boots. And there was another famous save by Jack Fitzgerald, who was the Kildare goalkeeper. And sometimes you'd often see him.
That'd be a black card.
You'd often see him with his hat, and sometimes you'd have a coat on him when he was in goals. And the fella that was writing up the report says, first of all, he says he had to take his coat off before he saved the ball. He said it was the greatest save ever in GAA football.
So Sunday, I don't know how they're going to manage making that movie with those little grainy effects in it, and no sound, of course. So you want to be able to read lips. But turn up on Sunday, and you never know, you might meet the two lads walking across the middle of the pitch, and you'll be remembered forevermore. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of myself and James, thank you very much. We're going to hand over to Darren Reardon. There's a very clever switch.
I actually married a little bit of history here.
Okay.
My wife,
If I called my wife history, I'd be dead. I'd be history. It would be history.
No, my father's cousin was 14 and he was up on a lamppost on Bloody Sunday. He was killed.
Wow. Was it? And of course, it's the thing, it's like Kennedy being shot, it's like Nixon visiting Kildare. People remember where they were on that day. I mean, if you were in Croke Park that day, wow, you know. I don't think you remember it the way that many people remember the GPO. There's a lot of people that weren't there at all. But Bloody Sunday, I mean, to be there, I mean, the fear once that shooting started as well.
We couldn't afford to go into it.
Yeah, he was firing up. Yeah.
Only 14. He was
Wow.
The most famous, the reason I got a lot of history when growing up was my great aunt who worked in Dublin at the time, and she was at Michael Collins's funeral, and she was at Arthur Griffith's funeral. She said, I stood in the same spot for Michael Collins's funeral, and then, Arthur Griffith's funeral, and then a week later at the same spot for Michael Collins's funeral as well. And she told me the story about the Black and Tans burning Bushel's shop in Naas, long before I'd ever even researched it or anything. I heard it first hand from a person that remembered it, and remembered actually seeing Black and Tans on the streets of Naas in 1920. When the Union Jack was flying over the courthouse, or flying over what we now know the Court Hotel, and was once the RIC barracks, when she was telling me this in the 70s or so, that was only 50 years ago. You know, from her viewpoint, I was listening to living history. Now I know it's 100 years, but I mean, many of us when you were younger, it was within that living history. You knew the people that had participated, that had witnesses all this type of thing.
From Kildare yourself?
From Naas, born in Naas, born and bred in Naas.
But should we all have our cross to bear? Sorry, Kildare town, so I just...
I'd just like to know who puts the flowers on Michael Collins's grave? Who pays for it?
A lot of, they say there's a lot of women put flowers.
But no matter when you go to Glasnevin
Yeah.
and Michael Collins' grave is always packed with
admirers from all over the world, I suppose. That's.
I'm not sure that Eamon De Valera left money behind for that.
Eamon never gets a flower.
Yeah.
Not far away from him.
Sorry.
Sorry, just on the canal banks of Salinsbury's, you mentioned you were from Nace. If you were going from Plain towards Nace, and if you turn right at the old meat factory, my mother's originally from there, well, not originally, but she grew up there. And when we used to visit our grand aunt and uncle years ago, there's an island where the canal divides called Soldier's Island. Do you know anything about that? We were always told it was a soldier killed or buried on it.
Seemingly, I heard that story too, that there was a soldier drowned or something there. And seemingly, another story was that there was a little outpost on it for when the barges were coming up and down the canal in case they were attacked in, say, 1798 or something like that. There's supposed to be a little outpost on that. That was another story I heard. So, again, we're just relying on memory because nobody knows for sure.
Maybe Darren will tell us all in a song. Monsieur Brereton. He's in the dark there now. Oh?
Yeah, better in the dark.
Are we on? Here on? Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Mario Corrigan and James Gurney for and also a special round of applause for James Murphy, who actually memorised all of that thing earlier on. I'm very envious of that as I sit here and read the words and everything I'm going to say on the page in front of me here. But I'm going to sing 3 songs, so I'm not going to leave you hold on for too long. So this one concerns an incident during the border campaign launched by the Irish Republican Army during the 1950s. It was written by Dominic Bean, the younger brother of playwright Brendan Bean, to the tune of an earlier folk song, The Merry Month of May. It tells the story of Fergal O'Hanlon, an IRA volunteer from Ballybay, County Monaghan, who was killed at the age of 20 in an attack at Brookborough, a Royal Ulster in Stanbury Barracks in County Fermanagh on the 1st of January 1957. The operation was devised and led by Sean Garland, an IRA man from Dublin. Another volunteer, Sean South from Limerick, who was also killed during the raid. All ye young rebels, smile and sing, for the love of one's country is a terrible thing. It banishes fear with the speed of a flame, and it makes us all part of the Patriot game. My name is O'Hanlon, I just turned 16. My home is in Monaghan, and where I was weak, I learned all my life that cruel England's to blame. So now I'm a part of the Patriot game. It's nearly 2 years since I wandered away with the local battalion of the bold IRA, for I read of our heroes who wanted the same, to play out my part in the Patriot game. This island of ours has too long been half free. 6 counties lie But most of our leaders are greatly to blame for shirking their part in the Patriot game. They told me how Connolly was shot in his chair. His wounds from the fighting, all bloody and bare. His fine body twisted, all battered and lame. He soon may be part of the Patriot game. And now I am dying, my body's all whole. Think of those traitors who bargained in souls. I'm sorry my rifle has not done the same to those grizzlies who sold out the Patriot game. From all ye young rebels, and listen what I sing, for the love of one's country is a terrible thing. It vanishes fear like the speed of flame, and it makes us all part of the Patriot game. And it makes us all part of the Patriot game. And it makes us all part of the Patriot game. But this next one was recently banned off of BBC. Rod Stewart recorded it, so there's just guess what it is. His latest album. So it tells the story of a guy called Joseph Plunkett and his sweetheart Grace Gifford. Joseph was a scholar and a poet and was one of the planners of the Easter Rising of 1916. This is a song about their love for one another before he was executed. It's always nice if everybody sings along with the choruses. As we gather in the chapel here in Old Kilmainham jail, I think about these past few weeks. Oh, will they say we failed from our school days? They have told us we must yearn for liberty. Yet all I want in this dark place is to have you here with me. Oh, Grace, just hold me in your arms and let this moment linger. The day beyond the dawn, and I will die. With all my love, I will lace this wedding ring upon your finger. There won't be time to share our love, for we must say goodbye. Now I know it's hard for you, my love, to ever understand the love I bear for these brave men, the love for my dear land. But when Porrick called me to his side down in the GPO, I had to leave my own sick bed to him I had to go. Oh, grace, just hold me in your arms and let this moment linger. They'll take me out the dawn, and I will die. With all my love, I will place this wedding ring upon your finger. There won't be time to share our love, for we must say goodbye. Now as the dawn is breaking, my heart is breaking too. On this May morn as I walk out, my thoughts will be of you. And I read some words upon the wall where everyone will know I loved so much that I could see his blood on the road. Oh, grace, just hold me in your arms and let this moment linger. They'll take me out of the dawn, and I will die. With all my love, I place this wedding ring upon your finger. There won't be time to share our love, for we must say goodbye. Oh, grace, just hold me in your arms and let this moment linger. They'll take me out at dawn, and I will die. With all my heart, I place this wedding ring upon your finger. There won't be time to share our love, for we will say goodbye. There won't be time to share our love. There won't be time to share our love. There won't be time to share our love. Oh, we'll say goodbye. I'm so dead with everyone singing there. So, ladies and gentlemen, before I do the last song here, I must remember now to say that we're doing a big raffle over the weekend because this festival, unlike me, doesn't run on Guinness and good times and stuff like that. So, if you want to buy a few tickets there at the end, we'd really appreciate it. Help us get over the line to pay for this festival. And also, we've got lots of other things coming up throughout the year as well. We've got the launch of a website, Prosperous Heritage website, and it's turning out to be really, really good actually. There's a hell of a lot of content on it, everything from when electricity was brought into Prosperous, stuff about the War of Independence, Prosperous, 1798, there's bookloads of stuff in 1798. Even in the past year we've paid for some really, really good drone footage. If you've not seen it or you're not on Facebook or YouTube, find someone who's on Facebook or YouTube and ask them to show you the video of Prosperous throughout the ages. Really, really well done. €2 a strip or 3 for £5. Special price for everyone here today. This next song, I'm sure most of us learned in school at some stage. I only found this out today, so that's why I'm reading it. This song was originally associated with the Scottish Jacobite Rising of 1745 and 6, when Bonnie Prince Charlie attempted to regain the throne for the House of Stuart. It was Patrick Pearse who composed the lyrics we're familiar with today. He understood the value of an inspiring marching song, one that could stir the blood of a nation. Pearse replaced Bonnie Prince Charles with a great Gaelic warrior, the famous pirate queen Gráinne ní Bhaile, Mali, rather, known as Granuaile. He eliminated the French and Spanish soldiers from the old lyrics, replacing them with loyal Gaelic warriors. In this way, Pearse created a new song to fit the new political scene, using a female chieftain from the 16th century as a symbol of Ireland's ancient struggles against the invader. And also, one thing I suppose I picked up on myself is back 100 years ago, during the time of the War of Independence, like these guys in the IRA, they marched through bogs, they marched through forests, they marched through the middle of nowhere, hills and everything, and nothing to kind of keep them entertained. They spent days walking from one place to another, so you can only imagine how monotonous it must have been at times. So this was one of the big songs that they used to sing to a march, so it would be together. So if you know this, give us a dig out with it as well. It's called Oro Shade of Vattel. And ladies and gentlemen, Kieran Healy up there in sound is going to give me loads of reverb. Thanks, Kieran. There you go. Okay. Give it up for Kieran up there as well. Thank you for setting up for my 15 minutes. Please do sing along with this one as well. Oro silva, oh walya, oro silva, oh walya, oro silva, oh walya, and this year not towering, oro silva, oh walya, oro silva, oh walya, oro silva, oh walya, and this year not towering, shade the valley, man and man, they got to be given, no be my share of their love. You get to listen going, oh, silva, oh, yeah, oh, silva, oh, yeah, oh, silva, oh, yeah. And this year the one with a chapter solid, all we ever think my brother, really finished the goal of study. The skirting she would go in, oh, silva, oh, yeah, oh, silva, oh, yeah, oh, silva, oh, yeah. And this year's sometimes towering.
True story. While you're all sitting in here singing your Republican songs and having your little Republican meeting, two guards came to the door, took one look in and buggered off. Which is very strange considering it's 100 years just down the road.
I see.
Maybe they're waiting for you outside. I don't know. James is going first.
Like, look, and that's just on the table over there as well. It's just an example of some of the prizes we have. There's a lovely gourmet snack hamper over there. I kind of wouldn't mind building myself. I like cheese and garlic and olives and stuff like that. There's a bottle of Prosecco in there as well. There's a lovely, what it's called, it's a scentsy warmer. Instead of burning candles and everything in your house, this thing lights up and there's a few different scented bars and the wax stuff and everything, and it uses very little electricity and all as well. Really nice little piece, worth about 120 quid. And there's also there is a prize for a 3-course meal for 4 people in Dowlands as well, is one of the prizes as well. So it's also really, really good stuff there. And hopefully as well, over the next 24 hours, we'll do it more bits and pieces turning up, so plenty of prizes there as well. Again, it's just €2 a strip where you can get 3 for €5 there, so we really appreciate it. If you can support us, support us. Not sure, come down on Sunday and give us your money. And again, don't forget, on Sunday, our gates are open at 1 o'clock. We've got a really, really interesting museum. One of the really cool things I think myself about the museum is we've got families of some of the local people who took part in the War of Independence have brought some of the weapons that were used at the time and have some really interesting biographies and stuff about them as well. Dan, there's a relation of yours, Mick McCormick, him as well, so his gun that he used at the time is going to be there on display as well. And Tom Murphy's, some of his toys are going to be on display as well, and things like that as well. So call down there if you want to get down and see the museum before the match and the reenactment all kicks off.
Are you going to tell them about the big secret? No?
The big secret? It's a secret.
What else are you bringing? Are you going to tell them now?
For the football.
Silverware, yeah.
I think the big secret is not a big secret anymore, but we will have Sam in Prosperous on Sunday.
The Sam Maguire can stay in County Kildare forevermore. Even if it is a new one. Yeah.
But they want to touch it now because we'll probably never get to do it again. So listen, thanks very much. Enjoy the rest of the weekend. Don't forget, 1 o'clock everything kicks off.
Thanks very much, lads.
Thanks very much. See you Sunday.
See you Sunday. I think it's Joe.
Oh,
You're taking man.
I'm not the taker. Thanks for calling me.
Drop me to Sanders.
Please do. Yeah. Mary's going to send the tickets.
Goodbye everybody on Facebook. Thanks for watching.